So it turns out, according to Sony, we've been wrong if we've been calling the bottom button on the PlayStation controller X. And surprisingly, a lot of us have. Now, I shouldn't say surprisingly because for the most part, looking back on it, it's kind of been left up to our own interpretation when we look at it. And I've gone back through some of the instruction manuals, which I'll talk about too. And yeah, it's widely been left up to our own interpretation of what we see. And what's really funny about this situation is I used to know someone who would call that button that we call X cross because they saw all of the shapes. And I thought they were a bit strange for that because I said, well, it's an X. But thinking back on it, yeah, I used to call it circle, triangle, square. So the next logical button or the next logical symbol that would be there probably would be a cross symbol or a 45-degree angle plus button. That's probably what I should have called it, as a 45-degree angle plus, but I guess cross is easier to say, although not really compared to X. So it was interesting to see kind of everyone just come to the realization that Sony considers that the cross button and not the X button. But I had some thoughts about this, and I thought, hey, you know what would be interesting is if in their controllers, some controllers do this, they'll like kind of define what each button is inside of it. I thought, well, what if we just opened a couple controllers and see if they do define what it is, and maybe we can catch them using X rather than cross inside. I thought that'd be kind of fun to do as well. So let's go through this. First, though, I want to show you a few things here, okay? Because this is going to kind of set things up here. So this was Eurogamer who collected a lot of this information that you're seeing here, where they talk about we've all been calling the DualShock's X button the wrong name and PlayStation's had enough. This was PlayStation UK who put out a tweet about this, and I followed up with my own tweet with a poll, and it seemed like most people did call it X. Growing up or even now. I mean, technically, when I look at the PlayStation, my mind goes to X, probably because of Microsoft and their Xbox and Nintendo and their platforms, whether it's the Switch or anything else. Generally, we have an X button. So that's probably why most of us look at it and say X. We've just always known as an X button. And that's something that PlayStation did when they showed up in the market, was instead of go with letters, they went with like literal shapes. I mean, it was a good way to stand out, except we kept calling cross apparently X. So this is from PlayStation UK, where they said triangle, circle, cross, square, and they go on to say that it's called cross. It seemed like they had been seeing one too many people say that it was X. It's not X, it's cross. I'm probably still gonna call it X, by the way. I don't know, but you know, that's what they wanted to go with. So we go down further. People are talking a bit about this, right? Like this is a tweet that we need to remember because it's going to help me down the road here. This is as you see here, SIE Crimson. Because this debate grinds my gears, I'll finish it once and for all. Crosses have the same distance. Okay, keep this in mind. Between each stick, crosses form a square. X's don't have the same distance between each stick. X's form a rectangle. That's basic geometry. So we have a nice little diagram there. Okay, that makes sense to me. The cross has the same distance between each one. Looking at the PlayStation controller, yeah, that'll be a cross if that's the case. So that makes sense to me. And then going down as people just having fun with it, you know. But it was a serious, like, topic of conversation going on. So I decided to look around. And I did pull up some of the manuals, because you can look at all these on Sony's website. You can look at the instruction manuals and everything. They have them in PDF format, so you can read through them. But I can't seem to find them saying cross in any of these older manuals. What I see them saying is just the symbol. They're like, press the triangle symbol button, press the square symbol button, press the, cross symbol button. I never really saw them say press cross or press triangle like spelled out. So again, they've kind of left that up to the interpretation. Now, some have said that they have been able to find cross in some of the instructions and everything, and honestly, if anyone goes through it and finds it, I'd be very curious to see that, because it is interesting to not see in like the basic ones. Like this is for the DualShock controller here, so this is where I would expect them to say cross button. But whenever I see it, it's generally just the symbol X. If I look through any of the instruction manuals for like any of the games, like Metal Gear Solid 3, for example, it just shows the button symbol, and that's it. And I've seen that in others as well, but those are a bit more straightforward, where it's ABXY, for example. these are symbols, and I think that's why it's been left up to people's interpretation. So what I decided to do was grab a handful of older controllers for the PlayStation, and I figured we're going to open them up and see if we have any etchings or anything inside that will designate each button, because that would probably make sense for them to do that. So I started with the original DualShock controller for the PS1, which is a system I'm working to do a video on, but I wanted to get the screen for it because I think that'd be cool to kind of do it all in one there. But opening it up, I did not see any etchings in that. So there's no like designations inside or anything there. They even used like, for some of these controllers, they used like ribbons in place of the board, which was a cool way to save money, I would say, back then. But nothing on the DualShock controller. So then I jumped over to the DualShock 2 controller and to see if there's anything in there. Opening that one up, again, nothing. No etchings, no nothing, no like, this is like the triangle. This is where the triangle pad is. Nothing. So then I said, okay, how about we jump over to the original controller? We're going all the way back to the original PlayStation controller. Opening that one up was interesting, because when I did open it up and I looked at it, we do have actual designations. We have our triangle, we have our square, we have our circle, and we have our what appears to be X. That's right. They used an X for the designation on this controller. I have to imagine, all right, just putting this out there, I have to imagine they did not have a cross button or on their like printer or etcher, whatever they're using for the board, and they had to put an X, which works out great, by the way, for me with that tweet that says it's an X because you measure between the points. So, oh, good. It looks like Sony is calling it an X in one of the only spots I can find. Now, I will say I have found spots on for the PS4, for example, and the PS3 when they were describing the motion controller, right, the move controller, they did call it cross. So I will say that they have called that button cross several times. If you go on the PlayStation 4 website, they do have in parentheses cross. So I feel like Sony is also realizing that because they've left it up to our own interpretation, that we have pretty much called it X because of that. But hey, inside the original PlayStation controller, the one that came with the original system, it technically says X, SW-X, or Switch X. So they I don't know if they were thinking that at the time when it came over to the US or something or what, but it says cross on the outside, sure, but it says X on the inside. Oh, also it doesn't help that some games just outright said that it's the X button.
Press the X button at the top of a jump.
Wait a minute, who made Spyro? It was Insomniac and Sony. What do they know? So I went ahead and opened up just for fun the PlayStation Classic controller. It is pretty funny to look inside of this thing because it just has it uses a USB cable that actually plugs into the motherboard inside. It's not directly soldered, which means if you buy a PlayStation Classic for $20, you will get two USB cables you can use separately. That's right. So, hey, the PlayStation Classic keeps building in value. That is a great value now at this point at 20 bucks. Flipping it over though, it doesn't have any markings at all. It actually looks like they went with a similar ribbon design that they had been using previously, probably to save money and in some cases maybe even give kind of a more authentic feel, I guess. But it's a pretty straightforward design. I just think it's funny to see that they're using a cable that like plugs in to make it all work. But hey, I mean, saves money, and it comes with two USB cables, so that $20 looking pretty good. But at the end of the day, Sony makes the system, so I guess if Sony's making it and they say it's called cross, I guess it's called cross. I don't think I'm ever going to say cross in person. I don't think I'm going to say, if someone asks me and they go, hey, how do I jump in this game? I don't think I'm going to say press cross, because that sounds weird. I'll still probably just say press X. Or maybe I'll do what Sony's been doing this whole time, and if somebody says, hey, how do I jump in this game? I'll just go